Hello, Year 3! I have been so thrilled to see the stories that you've been sending in. They are so interesting to read, so please don't stop writing. You're so creative, it's such a talent that you all have for writing, and it really makes my day to have the work coming into the Year 3 email address. I've already picked a few stories that I think are going to get some Emerald Awards, maybe even a Gold Award for one or two people for all of their work that they've sent in this week. To keep working hard and keep staying motivated. We've just got 1 or 2 more days of story writing left, and then we're going to have finished our project. So, Jade and Indigo groups, you've not been doing the story writing unit with us, so you don't need to be here unless you have already started your story from the last few days. Everybody else, in order to do today's lesson, all you're going to need is your last few days of writing. So I've got this as my story so far. I know that I've written a lot. I am a teacher, so of course I'm going to write more than all of you students, so don't worry if you haven't got this much, but you should at least have a couple of pages of writing, and you should have, this is my beginning, which was 2 pages, and this is my middle, so you need to make sure that you have your beginning and your middle all together, because we're going to be reading through our stories in a second. You also need to have your plan ready. My plan is on the screen in front of me. I'm going to put a photo up so you can see that I've got my plan with me. It is essential that while you are doing any kind of writing work, you keep your plan visible at all times so that you can follow it. Otherwise, it won't be able to help you at all. Once you have all of that, you need to take a new piece of paper or continue. So I'm going to continue on the back of where I just was. If you are halfway down the piece of paper, you can leave 3 lines and start a new date and LI, but try and keep your story all together in one place. And you're going to write the date and the LI. So I'm going to do it with you. So we're writing the 14th of May 2020. And the LI is to write the end of a story. Okay, hopefully you've written your date and LI. If you need more time, pause the video now. But if you're finished, let's carry on. So today's lesson is going to be quite short and simple because I want you to have lots of time to finish your story, because I know some of you have been struggling and it's taking you a little bit more time, so you're going to have a bit of extra time today. Before we write the end of the story, it's very important that we check through what we've written already and make sure that it all makes sense. Because just in case we've missed out something in the story or something doesn't make sense, it's better to correct it now than wait till we finished our story and realise that we missed something out that's really important. So, I'm going to show you how I check my story. While we're checking to make sure it makes sense, there's 3 main things that I want you to check for. First of all, does the story follow a logical sequence? So, can you follow the character doing things bit by bit, or have you accidentally skipped a scene or accidentally introduced a character and forgot to explain who they are? Make sure it follows in logical steps. If you're not sure about how to check for this, the best way is to read it to a friend or a parent or a sibling who can listen to the story and say, hey, wait a minute, maybe this part doesn't make sense, or you forgot to explain this. You can do it yourself if you think about it carefully and imagine you're someone who's never read your story before and think, is there anything I've left out? The second thing is a mistake that a lot of people have been making, and that is they've been changing the tense by accident while they've been writing. Normally, stories happen in past tense, but it doesn't matter too much of which tense you chose to write your story in. The most important thing is you can't keep changing it from the present to the past. And you're going to hear me read out my story and you'll see how I correct those mistakes when I'm reading, because when I'm reading out loud, I'll notice where the mistakes are. The last thing is you need to check that your sentences make sense. Maybe there was a sentence where you forgot to put a verb in, or maybe you accidentally made a sentence that was 10 lines long and you forgot to break it up into shorter sentences. Or maybe you only used simple sentences and you forgot that you can sometimes join 2 sentences together to make a conjunction. So that's what we're going to check for. Does it make sense? Are you writing in the right tense? And do your sentences sound correct? Those are the 3 things we're checking for. So I'm going to read my story, but I'm going to try and spot some mistakes for myself. It was a cold, rainy day with dark grey clouds scrolling across the sky. A little girl with caramel skin and sleek black hair was playing in the playground at her school. This girl's name is Alia. Ah, I've spotted my first mistake. I should have said this girl's name was Alia because I started off my story in the past tense. I said it was a cold, rainy day. So I can't just say this girl's name is Alia because my whole story is in the past tense. So I've rubbed it out and I'm going to write in was Alia. Now I've made one correction. And she has, again, I accidentally put the present tense, it should be the past tense, so I'm going to change that to had. And she had huge eyes like green orbs that are always observing. It shouldn't be are, it should be that were always observing. So I need to put that into the past tense. The school was in the suburbs of London. So now I've gone back to the past tense, which is correct. So it was mostly quiet, but the playground itself was chock full of children who were running and screaming with glee. Alia was enjoying break. That was too many words in that sentence. Maybe, so it was mostly quiet, but the playground itself was chock full of children who were running and screaming with glee. Alia was enjoying break. I should put a full stop there so that I've got 2 shorter sentences. Excuse me while I just skip past some of the bits of my story that I was reading. All of these bits were fine, so we're going to skip. Then I found another bit to correct. So I've done that as 2 separate sentences. She leant down to peer at his knee. One of her salty tears landed on the boy's knee. But I can actually combine that into one sentence and it will flow better. When she leant down to peer at his knee, I can say that. When she leant down to peer at his knee, one of her salty tears landed on the boy's knee. And then just skip the next bit. As you can see, I'm reading every word out loud and checking to see if it makes sense. I can help, she said. I have healing powers. Everybody except the little boy from the playground started to snigger. I'm not crazy, it's true, called Alia desperately, trying to make eye contact with Mr. Monroe, but he was too busy talking to the school nurse. Then, without warning, Miss Patel collapsed. The hall erupted into panic. Now you see the problem is here, in terms of the story making sense, I haven't explained who Miss Patel is. I just said Miss Patel collapsed. So maybe I should actually add some information in order to make my story make more logical sense. So I could say then, without warning, a year 6 teacher called Miss Patel, so now we know who she is in the story. A year 6 teacher called Miss Patel collapsed. That's better. Now you can see I'm carrying on reading to the end of my middle section, which I wrote yesterday. And the reason I'm not stopping is because all of this was fine. I didn't need to make any changes. So that's my story up to the middle section, and I know I need to carry on my ending from there in a second. But what I did first was make sure that my story makes sense. So now you're going to do that. I want you to get your whole story ready in order, and I want you to say it out loud, listening to see if there's any things you can correct, if it makes sense, if the tense is correct, or if any of the sentences could be improved. And then as soon as you've finished reading it through, you're going to carry on writing underneath your LI the next bit of the story. So just as soon as you've finished reading it, now that it's fresh in your head, you're going to carry on writing. And when you're writing, make sure you are following your plan. I'm going to follow my plan, so I've just done to the end of the reaction, and now I need to move on to the resolution and make sure that it all follows on and finishes, and you get to see where all the characters end up at the end. So pause the video, read it through and check for any corrections. Then you can go ahead and write at the end, making sure you refer to your plan and remembering to write on alternate lines. If you want to see an example, I've included a model of the story that I wrote and the ending that I wrote, so you can listen to that first and then you can finish your story, or you can go ahead and just finish your story by yourself. It's up to you. Mr. Monroe called Alia's parents to explain that she needed to go to hospital. After that, things seemed to happen in a blur. 1 minute, Alia was in the hall. The next, she was being bundled into a taxi with Miss Patel. and then she found herself sitting in a waiting room in the local hospital. The air was heavy with tension. Alia could just make out Miss Patel's whispers as she spoke to the doctor, but there were a lot of other bleeping and whirring sounds in the background. After a few minutes, the doctor came back and took Alia's hand, leading her to a room full of beds. At first, the people lying sick in the beds seemed suspicious of Alia, but when the first few were cured, they all started to laugh in relief and give her hugs and shake her hand. Within a few hours, all the patients were full of energy and on their feet, calling their delighted relatives to say that they had been cured by a magic girl. The pandemic was over, and Alia was the hero. But to be honest, she didn't want to be interviewed by the papers or be on TV. She just wanted to go home and see her family. Miss Patel called her parents to collect her, who squeezed her tight when they arrived. "You deserve a treat for what you did," said her mum. "What would you like?" "A big vat of water," laughed Alia, suddenly feeling very thirsty. When you've finished writing your ending just like I did, making sure it's for your own story, don't forget to take a photo of your work and email it in to me so that I can read it. Good luck!